The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone. Good day, and welcome to the Genesis Zone show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We're going to be talking about obesity today. It's a subject that I'm very familiar with. And it's a subject that has become very near and dear to my heart because it's been an ongoing journey for decades of my life. In fact, most of my entire life. For those that have been hanging around the show any length of time, you've probably heard bits and pieces of my story. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that and just my thinking theoretically on what happened. Because I don't come from a family that really struggles with obesity issues. So where did this come from? Because we know to a certain degree that some of these things are at least familial, even though we may not understand the full genetic ramifications of obesity. We know that they tend to run in families. And I just really didn't have that level of obesity on either side of my family. So what happened and how can this help you understand? How can my journey on how I've worked through this help you understand maybe where your struggles might be? So let's go back to the beginning. At age 5, I was electrocuted. And again, some of you that have been hanging around for a while know this piece of my story, that I was electrocuted at age 5. I had an out-of-body experience at that time. And from that point forward, things began to change. If you look at my pediatric records, and I have a good fortune of having a copy of those. If you look at my pediatric records, I was on the low end of the normal age, weight for age range up until age 5. At age 5, when I was electrocuted, I began to gain weight. And at my 6-year checkup and my 7-year checkup, the 6-year checkup, I was on the high end of the normal weight range for my age. I had moved from the lowest for my weight category, age category, to the highest. And then at age 7, when I went back for a physical, I had actually crossed over into the obese category. I remember it was so embarrassing. I never could wear jeans from a normal place. I always had to go to Sears and Roebuck. And I know this sounds crazy for a lot of people because I don't even think they're in existence anymore. But Sears and Roebuck had this brand of jeans that were called Tough Skins. And I had to wear the husky size Tough Skin jeans, which means they had big legs because my thighs were so big. And that was always embarrassing for me as a child. Now, fast forward throughout my childhood, always being overweight. Then I get into my teenage years and I discovered exercise. So between my 8th and 9th grade year, I lost about 40 pounds and was really thin. And I was thin all through high school. And then I get into college, still thin, get into graduate school, start putting on a little bit of weight there just because of the stress of, working part-time, being in graduate school, so on and so forth. And then get out into the real world and experiencing life. And I'm very active again. So I'm mountain biking and things like that. And I take the weight back off. And then life sets in again, end up moving, changing practice locations to a different area of the country, and didn't have access to mountain biking and trails and things like that. In fact, it was very dangerous where we moved to, that people seemed like they didn't have any respect for cyclists on the road and they would just as soon run over you. So I stopped cycling. And within a few short years, I gained a tremendous amount of weight. Now, mind you, this whole time, I was from age 5, the time I was electrocuted, up until this time, I was having quote unquote night terrors, or at least that's what I'd been diagnosed with. And less than 1% of children carry that into adulthood, but it's still was what it was, and it appeared to be night terrors. And then at age 45, I end up having a breakthrough night terror episode, in air quotes, serious air quotes here, during the day. And because obviously it wasn't happening at night. And it turned out to be a cardiac condition where my heart was stopping in the middle of the night. The heart stopping in the middle of the night correlated exactly with the night terror episodes that I was having in the night. And come to find out, my heart stopping was causing my body to dump massive amounts of adrenaline, to jumpstart my heart back. Well, 40 years of exposure to that level of adrenaline had caused just compounded weight gain over the decades. And I ended up being at around 390 pounds when I realized I've got to do something different. Now, I had already started the weight loss journey before I realized that I was having cardiac issues. I had hired a personal trainer. I was working out with a personal trainer on a regular basis. And that is what jumpstarted my weight loss journey. And for those of you guys who may be thinking, well, I can't afford a personal trainer. You may not be able to afford a personal trainer. And there were years that I couldn't. And there were years that I just walked. I literally would walk an hour and a half every evening after I got off work. Yes, it's a lot of time and it's a big commitment, but when you pretty much work behind a desk, you're seeing clients, and in psychiatry, that's what I was doing. I was sitting most of the day when I wasn't doing inpatient hospital rounds. And I was sitting talking to clients, and I wasn't getting the movement and exercises that my body needed. Now, like I said, I'd started the journey of working out, exercising, like I'd done in high school between my 8th and 9th grade year when I lost all that weight, because it was exercise that did that. Eating clean, believe it or not, even at 390 pounds, I ate fairly clean. Now, what I did do wrong is I didn't eat enough. So I was pretty much on a starvation protocol diet, in that I didn't eat enough of a balanced macronutrition, meaning protein, fat, and carbs. And I had low calories. So my body was staying in conservation mode all the time. On top of that, I was dumping all of that adrenaline every night, because I was having those episodes 2, 3, and 4 times a night, where my heart was stopping. I was dumping adrenaline. And when adrenaline gets dumped, what comes right behind it is cortisol. Cortisol is another stress hormone. Well, cortisol causes weight gain around the middle and your hips and your thighs and so on and so forth. Well, go back to my story at age 5 when I was electrocuted. And in 2 years, I moved from the low end of the normal weight range for my age to age 7 being obese, in the obese category at age 7. And remember, I said I had to wear those tough skin, husky sized jeans that were bigger in the legs because my legs got so big. Well, and I got bigger around the middle as well. And it all boiled down to cortisol. All of that adrenaline was dumping, and the cortisol was following right behind it. So for 40 years, my body was under a tremendous amount of stress, and it was releasing these stress hormones as part of that process. Once I realized that, and I had the epiphany as I'm lying in the hospital bed after having had a pacemaker put in to regulate my heart rhythm at night, it dawned on me, oh my gosh, that's why I've struggled with weight my entire life. That's why I'm kind of the outlier in my family, and don't really have anybody in the family that has struggled with weight to this degree. And it just made sense. Everything started coming together. So I started working with a naturopathic doctor to help me fix my adrenals. And we made major progress in healing my adrenals. It took about 1.5 years to get my adrenals back to where they needed to be. I will tell you, and that's been now about 9 years ago. If I'm being totally honest, even fixing the adrenals and taking about 18 months to do that. Right now, to this day, 9 years later, I still have to be very cognizant of my adrenal function because I become, I move into stress category very, very easily. So that has caused me to do a lot of different alternative medicine type things like meditation and mindfulness works beautifully for helping regulate cortisol levels, regulate stress levels, regulating adrenaline responses, and so on and so forth. Also, during that time that I had all of that weight on me, that up to 390 pounds at one time, it was a 16-year journey with 9 different antidepressants that never seemed to work. And it's no wonder that they didn't work because if the true root cause is the fact that you're in this high stress state, this chronic stress state, where your adrenals are being fatigued because you're dumping so much adrenaline for decades, then it's no wonder that I struggled with anxiety and depression. So those things started resolving as my weight started coming down, as I was exercising more, which decreases stress and decreases cortisol responses and so on and so forth. But then I was hitting around age 40 and I started struggling with hormone imbalances. Surprise, surprise. We know that guys around age 30 start with about a 1 to 2% per year decline in either hormone output or hormone conversion to the useful forms of hormone. Women, guys, they have us beat. So women don't start that process until about age 35. So guys will start around age 30 with the hormone decline. Women will start around age 35 with the hormone decline. And if we don't do something about it, our metabolism suffers and we end up putting on weight around the middle that we don't want to have to deal with, and so on and so forth. So naturally, I went to bioidentical hormones. They work tremendously well. I was always interested in growth hormone, but for certain side effect reasons, wasn't quite sure that I wanted to do that. So I discovered after my functional medicine training, I discovered peptides. Peptides are simply chains of amino acids, and we produce peptides from our diet within our body. Again, as we age, those peptides decline over time. And there are peptides that mimic the peptides within your body, man-made peptides I'm talking about that mimic the peptides within your body. And some of those peptides are growth hormone stimulating and growth hormone mimicking peptides that work tremendously well. So as I've gotten into my 50s, and I'm 54, I just turned 54 a few weeks ago, I actually started doing peptides about 4 years ago for growth hormone reasons, and the results have been absolutely tremendous. So if you combine that with getting the adrenals fixed, getting the hormones fixed, now we're working on growth hormone and the imbalances there. And there's probably a reason why I could have had growth hormone deficiencies. It was never tested throughout my life, is because I had a pretty severe head trauma injury around age 10 and had a grade 4 concussion. And we know that concussive type injuries cause damage to the pituitary gland and can disrupt sleep. They can disrupt hormones. They can disrupt growth hormone, the whole 9 yards. So we see this in athletes that have repeated head trauma from like football injury, American football injuries and things like that. So I had that at age 10. It just compounded what was already going on with the electrocution injury that injured my heart. And here we were with this perfect storm. So bit by bit, through the years, I've been able to piece together the things that worked for me, such as fixing my adrenals, balancing my hormones, getting my growth hormone levels back up to par, but not using a growth hormone substitute, instead using peptides that cause my body to naturally increase my own growth hormone levels within my body. And then discovering photobiomodulation. Now, photobiomodulation is a really fancy term for light therapy, and they can come in many different frequencies. There are specific frequencies that work for muscle and deeper tissues that work for, and there are different frequencies that work for cutaneous and skin. There are different frequencies that work for fat metabolism and things like that. And then there are different frequencies that work on the gonads, whether they're ovaries for women or testes for men, that cause hormones to increase. And so I've added that through the years, along with Chinese medicine and acupuncture, things like that. So you may be listening to this and you're thinking, God, there's no way I can afford to do all these things. I will tell you this: it takes a disciplined approach to begin with, and you need to start with diet and exercise. Now, I know that sounds like an old mantra. You need to start with diet and exercise, but you do. And diet and exercise can be relatively free, meaning you don't have to hire somebody to tell you how to do it. Now, I will tell you this. I saw even better improvement when I ran my personal genetic profile to understand how my body methylated, how my body's mitochondria functioned, how detoxification system worked, how my inflammatory management worked, and then which diet protocols were best for me, which exercise protocols were best for me based on my genetics. And you can actually look at these things now. Are they perfect? They're fairly close to perfect. They're not exact, but we can get you closer to perfect faster in an approach than we can without genetics. So what I discovered is that when I lost a lot of weight initially, of course, I was younger, I was in my 30s, a keto diet worked beautifully well for me. It was not sustainable long term, but it worked for a huge amount of weight loss. So I had done that and I knew that that worked. However, a true keto diet is very high in fat. As it turns out, my genetics say that I do need a high protein diet, but I need a low fat diet and a low carbohydrate diet. So what does that mean for me? That means I keep my fat grams, my macros on the fat, below 40% of my overall calorie macro intake. That is considered a low fat diet when you keep it below 40%. Most days mine's around 20 to 27%, somewhere along in there. Now, do you need fat? The answer is yes. We need fat to help with nerve conduction, nerve myelinization, which is the sheath around the nerves that insulates them and protects them and allows for nerve conduction to happen faster. So we need fat. We need healthy fats to help produce our own hormones, whether they be thyroid hormones or testosterone or estrogen or progesterone. We need good, healthy fats to help produce our hormones. So eliminating fat from the diet altogether is not healthy. I don't like one-sided diets. There was an influencer on Instagram and TikTok that just recently died this week, and she was a fruitarian. So she stuck with exotic tropical fruits, and that's all she ate. And she literally starved herself to death, is what the article said. So it's a sad, sad story, but the same thing can happen if you put yourself on a high fat, high protein diet and you don't get any fruits or vegetables. You don't get any healthy carbs like wild rice and oats, if you can tolerate oats. These things are needed in our diet to help us function. And I've learned that lesson the hard way through the years, because believe me, if there's been a diet, I've done it. And I don't like the word diet. I like lifestyle modification, lifestyle changes, lifestyle living, because you should look at what you do and your approach as simply a lifestyle choice for your health. and it needs to be customized. It needs to be personalized. And that's why personalized medicine, I believe, is the only way to have sustainable and meaningful weight loss. And when I say meaningful, what I mean is weight loss that keeps you healthy. Now, do we need to focus just completely on weight? The answer is no. I've learned this lesson the hard way through the years. And right now, and it's an old habit, and I'm being completely honest with you, I'm literally confessing issues that I've had through the years. I've had plateaus that lasted up to 2 years on my journey from losing down from 390 pounds and losing 130 pounds. I've literally plateaued for 2 years before. Did I obsess about the scales during that time? You better believe I did. Every morning, as soon as you get out of bed and you use the bathroom, step on the scales. That's been my MO most of my life. But the times that I've lost the most weight is when I just focus on my diet, clean eating, and exercise, and I give the scales up. So I'm recently coming out of a 9-month plateau because I've gotten to where my tolerance for plateaus is not great anymore, meaning I don't like being stuck that long. So I know I have to do something a little bit different. I have a personal trainer. I work out with him 5 days a week. And I asked him recently, I said, I know what I need to do to break this plateau. As far as my habits, I need to turn my scales into you. And he just chuckled. He said, it won't be the first time. So the next morning, I brought my scales to him and we started a completely new routine as far as our approach on exercise with significant, most every single weight training day is a high intensity interval training weight training day. And that genetically is what works for me. It may not be what works for you. Genetics can tell that, but high intensity interval training works for me. I know I need to eat higher protein, low carb, and low fat. And so I do that. And just in the past week and a half, since I've turned my scales in, I've been eating super clean, measuring and prepping my food, measuring out all my macros in an app that I use called Lose It. I've used it for years. It works beautifully well. And I can go ahead and plan out my diet for the day before I even eat and go, these are the things I'm going to eat. So I literally open up my phone, say, okay, it's lunchtime. What am I supposed to eat? Oh, this is what I have down for lunch. I fix that really quickly, or it's already prepped and I pull it out of the refrigerator and it's done. I don't have to think about it. Because when you're hungry and you're having to think about food, you snack while you're eating. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but those extra calories push you out of balance, whether they be your total calories for the day, whether they be your macros become imbalanced, like you get more fat, you get more carbohydrates, you get too much protein. And yes, you can have too much protein. I've done that before. I've literally gained weight on a high protein diet simply because I didn't need all that protein. And this was a low fat, high protein diet, like what I call a Mediterranean carnivore, so to speak. So I was eating really clean fish and chicken and things like that for my protein. And I was still gaining weight and I couldn't explain it. And I realized at that point, it was because I was way too lopsided on my macros. The minute I go back to tracking what I'm putting in my mouth and planning out my food for the day is when I start losing weight. So back to what I was about to say a second ago, in the past week and a half, I can't tell you how much weight I lost, but I can tell you from the way my clothes are fitting, I've gone down at least 2 inches in the waist, at least, maybe a little bit more. I've gone down at least an inch and a half, inch and 3/4 in each leg, upper thigh measurement, and then around the buttocks, just around your circumference that way, I've lost about 2 inches as well. So I know that just based on the way my clothes are fitting. So what we're doing is working. And again, this is a 9-month plateau that I'm breaking, that I'm coming out of. And there are different things as we age that we have to try. We have to constantly modify. I can tell you from personal experience, what worked for me in my 20s does not work for me now. What worked for me in my 30s doesn't work for me now when it comes to diet and exercise. I have to constantly change it and keep my body guessing. The one thing that is consistent and does work is track every single thing that goes in your mouth. When I'm working with clients, one of the first things I do when I do a diet assessment on the first visit is I simply say, tell me what you had for breakfast this morning. If it's an afternoon visit, I'll say, tell me what you had for lunch. I'll record that. Tell me what you had for breakfast. I'll record that. Tell me what you had for supper the night before, and I'll record that. And typically, that's pretty well the way people eat. And I'll say, is this typical of most days that you're eating? Yeah, it's pretty typical. I may have substitutions of this for this or this for this, and I'll document those substitutions. But you can kind of get an idea of how a person eats. Now, here's the interesting thing. It would shock you to know how many people mindlessly eat, because they literally cannot tell you what they had. They may be able to tell you, if it's an afternoon appointment, what they had for lunch, but they struggle to tell you what they had for breakfast, and what they had for supper last night, they absolutely cannot remember. So one of the things I ask them when they can't remember this is, I said, are you eating at the kitchen table or your dining room, at your dining room table, or are you sitting in front of your computer or in front of your television? Invariably, every single time, they will tell me, I'm sitting in front of my computer or I'm sitting in front of my television. In other words, this tells me that they're mindlessly eating. If you want to be in tune and start the practice of mindfulness, start doing it with your food. When you're eating, eat at a table, eat at your bar, in your kitchen. I don't care, but don't eat in front of a computer. Don't eat with your phone in your hand. Don't eat with your computer sitting right there in front of you. When you plate your food, and I encourage you to plate your food just as if you were serving it to someone at a restaurant, plate your food, sit down, and then look at it and look at all the colors. And there needs to be colors there, by the way. It doesn't need to be all one color like tan or brown. Those are not healthy foods. It needs to have a lot of color, a lot of greens, a lot of reds and yellows and oranges. It needs to have those colors on the plate. If you don't have those colors, you're not sustaining yourself nutritionally. And I want you to just look at that food, be mindful about it. Tell me, what do you see? What textures do you see? What colors do you see? And you may even want to say it out loud, or you may want to say it in your head. And then I want you to bend over that plate, and I want you to smell that food and see how many different smells that you can smell on that plate. And then I want you to just pause for a second, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and just give gratitude for what is right here in front of you. There are a lot of people in the world that don't have the ability to do that. I've worked in countries and done medical relief work in countries where they serve it's a protein, high protein, high carbohydrate, mostly high carbohydrate food mixture. It's like a porridge, and it's brown and yucky looking. It's nasty looking. I don't even like the taste of it. It tastes nasty, but if it's all you've got, people in countries that's all they have access to, they crave it because it's life sustaining for them. We have the ability to enjoy these things and see different textures and see different colors and smell different smells. And we should give gratitude for what is presented to us and those things that we're able to sense and taste and smell and see, because we have the privilege of being able to do that. So be mindful when you're eating. And then as you take a bite of food, don't mindlessly eat and just take a couple of chomps on it and then swallow it down. No, really chew your food and then swallow. and notice what it feels like as it goes into your body. Do you feel it warm? Is it cold? Do you feel like, oh man, that the little slight headache I had because maybe my blood sugar is a little low, it's going away. Thank you so much for this life sustaining food that is helping my body survive. And that's just a practice that I've learned that works really, really well. Can you do that all the time? No, life happens, and sometimes you have to eat on the run. But if you can start moving in that direction of being more mindful about what you're putting in your mouth, if you can start tracking your food with any app, I don't care what app it is, start tracking what you're putting in your mouth, and then work with somebody like me to get your genetics checked so you can understand exactly what's going on with you and what exercise type you need to be participating in, what foods and dietary style, Mediterranean, paleo, keto, just a well-rounded, well-balanced diet in general. Those things we can discover now. And you owe it to yourself to do that. This is the 21st century. We have the ability to do that. We should be doing that. And the fact that it's not mainstream medicine right now, it's just, quite frankly, it's sad. Will it be one day? I hope it will be, but I don't know that it will. But until that time, because you've heard this and you heard this message, you can't unhear what you've heard. You can't unsee what you've seen. You know this now. You know this is available, and you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your health. You owe it to future generations to be able to get on track with what you need to get on track with in order to be as healthy as possible. And would it cause us to live a little bit longer? I dare say it might. I dare say it should, because we know people who struggle with obesity are more likely to have diabetes. They're more likely to have hypertension, high blood pressure. They're more likely to have cancer. They're more likely to have Alzheimer's. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So reach out. Feel free to message me on Messenger, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, at Dr. Brian G. Brown. And if you're curious about the whole genetics thing, I don't have one specifically for weight loss yet. That is coming, but I do have a free boot camp, a video series. It's really short, not a lot of time commitment. You can do it at your own pace. And you can go to Dr. Brian G. Brown, drbriangBrown.com/gene hack/bootcamp. You can enroll in the boot camp for free and just kind of start exploring what working with genetics looks like. Until next time, this is Dr. Brian Brown. Stay in the zone.